Everyone admired her success. She was the CEO, the woman who built her empire from the ground up, the boss who never let weakness show. To her employees, she was brilliant, powerful, and cold as steel. But behind the scenes, inside her home, her gaze often fell with quiet disappointment on the man she had married, her husband, the security guard. What she didn't know was that the man she looked down on carried a past so dangerous, so extraordinary, that it would one day save not only her company, but her life. Her name was Isabella Hart. At 35, she was already on the cover of business magazines, known for her sharp mind and relentless ambition. She lived in a world of glass towers and million-dollar contracts, where appearances mattered almost as much as profits. Her husband, David, was the opposite. Calm, steady, a man of few words. He worked quietly as a security guard in the very building Isabella owned. People often whispered behind their backs. The CEO married a guard. They sneered. To outsiders, it made no sense. To insiders, it was gossip they never tired of. And to Isabella, though she never admitted it aloud, sometimes the whispers echoed her own unspoken doubts. She had met David years before, when her company was still small. He was working part-time, tall and strong, with a quiet confidence that drew her in. He listened when others dismissed her. He encouraged her when she doubted herself. In those early days, love felt simple. But as her empire grew, so did the distance between them. At galas and board meetings, Isabella watched the wives of other CEOs flaunt their polished, high-profile husbands, lawyers, doctors, investors. And then there was David, who came home smelling of night shifts and cheap coffee, whose uniform was plain, whose life seemed ordinary. "Sometimes I wonder if you're content with this," Isabella said one evening, frustration seeping through her tone. David looked up from the dinner he had cooked. "With what? Being just a security guard. My husband. Don't you want more?" His eyes darkened, but his voice stayed calm. "I have enough. I have you. I have us." Isabella sighed, shaking her head. "That's not what I mean." What she didn't know, what she could never have guessed, was that David wasn't just a security guard. His past carried shadows darker than any boardroom secret. Before she met him, David had served in covert operations overseas. He had lived through missions nobody spoke about, seen dangers that haunted his sleep, and carried skills that made him lethal when necessary. But after too many years of blood and orders that cost innocent lives, he walked away. He wanted peace. He wanted normal. He wanted her. He never told Isabella. She didn't need to know. He wanted to protect her not just from danger, but from the man he used to be. But fate has a way of bringing buried truths back to light. One stormy evening, Isabella stayed late at the office to finalize a deal worth millions. The building was quiet, the staff gone, except for David on night duty. Suddenly, the lights flickered. Then, the sound of heavy boots echoed through the halls. Armed men stormed the lobby, masked, ruthless, demanding access to Isabella's office. They weren't random criminals. They were professionals, sent to steal sensitive documents that could cripple her company. Isabella froze when the intruders reached her floor. Her world of contracts and negotiations had not prepared her for the sight of rifles pointed in her direction. Panic surged through her chest. For the first time, the CEO who always had answers had none. And then David appeared. The men laughed when they saw him. "Step aside, guard," one sneered. "This isn't your fight." But David didn't move. His stance shifted, subtle but deadly. And when the first man lunged, the quiet security guard unleashed a storm Isabella had never imagined. His movements were precise, brutal, efficient, each strike the mark of years of training. Within minutes, two men were disarmed, their weapons sliding across the floor. Another swung at him, but David's counter was swift, sending him crashing into the wall. Isabella watched, her breath caught in her throat, as the husband she thought she knew revealed a side of himself she had never seen. His eyes were cold, his body unyielding. He wasn't just fighting, he was protecting. Protecting her. When the last man fled, bruised and broken, silence fell. Isabella's office was a mess, her heart pounding. She stared at David, trembling. What was that? Who are you?" David's chest rose and fell with controlled breaths. He bent down, picked up a fallen weapon, and set it aside. Finally, he met her eyes. "I'm your husband. That's all you need to know." But Isabella shook her head. "No, you're not just a guard. You've done this before. I saw it. Tell me the truth." For a long moment, David was silent. Then, with a heavy sigh, he sat down, the weight of his past pressing on him. Before I met you, I lived in a different world. I was trained for missions no one talks about. I saw things, did things, I'm not proud of. When I walked away, I promised myself I would never be that man again. I wanted a life where I was just David. Where I could love someone without blood on my hands. Isabella's eyes filled with tears. The man she thought was ordinary was anything but. And suddenly, all her doubts, all her comparisons, seemed small, shallow, even. You risked your life for me, she whispered. I'd do it 1,000 times, he replied quietly. Not because of who you are out there, he gestured toward the city skyline, but because of who you are to me. In that moment, Isabella's heart broke open. She realized how blind she had been. She had measured him against the world's standards, not knowing he had already lived through battles far beyond her imagination. She had looked down on him, not realizing he had chosen to stand down from a life of power and danger just to stand beside her. From that night on, everything changed. Isabella no longer introduced him as, just, a guard. She held his hand proudly, knowing the strength he carried was far deeper than appearances. And when people whispered, she no longer cared. Because she knew the truth. Her husband wasn't ordinary, he was extraordinary. And in the end, it wasn't her empire that saved her. It was the man she thought had nothing to prove, but who had already proven everything that mattered.